Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ad Age's Publishers Panel, where we have a brand and a technology partner provide us perspective and thought leadership on a key topic that we're all endeavoring to solve. I'm Josh Golden, the president and publisher of Ad Age, and on today's panel, we're going to speak about how doing good in general can help drive both society and business forward, and how brands can take meaningful action to drive real results. Today, I am joined by two very famous CMOs, Chris Brandt, the CMO of Chipotle, one of my favorite brands. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, sir. As well as Sai Coppola, the CMO of SheerID. Welcome, Sai.
Hi, Josh.
Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. I appreciate it very much. I want to also welcome our guests that are watching us live. They can jump on and say where they're from. We'll do a little shout outs a little bit later, as well as we'll have a live Q&A at the end of the panel. So feel free to post those comments right into the social stream, and we'll have the ability to ask both Chris and Sai direct questions regarding the panel. So if it's okay, let's just jump right on in.
Great.
Awesome. All right. So Chris, we're going to start with you. Consider today's current environment and the crises that all brands and frankly all of us as human beings in the country are facing. I think it's really important. I've seen how so many brands that have purpose embedded into their core basis of already existing, that it's easier for them to pivot and create content that makes sense. But purpose, it seems like purpose has been built into Chipotle's ethos for some time, as far as I understand. Maybe you can talk to me about the importance of that and where Chipotle stands today.
Yeah, I think, look, and when times get tough, I think you want to lean into what your core values are. And at Chipotle, we're lucky because our brand purpose of cultivating a better world was here with the founder, Steve Ells, back in 1993 when the brand started. And so I think for us that's a great North Star for us. And I think you can feel that not only, in the headquarters, but you can feel it all the way down at the store level where, what we're preparing is what Chipotle is responsibly sourced real food prepared fresh every day with classic culinary techniques. And our employees feel good about serving that food to their families and their friends and their communities. And I think that really helps you in a tough time lean on your values, right? And that lean on that cultivating a better world. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we got to do the right thing by the people that are in the company, by the planet that we're on, and through our whole food with integrity and supply chain. So during a tough time, that's exactly what we leaned on. And I think it made a lot of our decisions pretty easy. I think that we had to do. We know we had to pivot like everybody else, and we leaned into our digital ecosystem. But we also really did a great job, I think, of communicating with our employees and making sure that they were safe and that they knew the company was behind them. And I think that really helped the company really come together, adapt to a much more digital environment than in-restaurant environment. And I think it's going to enable us to come out better on the other side.
Yeah, I've been traveling this weekend, and the lines at restaurants, it seems it's surprising to see that quantity of individuals attending. Even though it's just a drive-through experience, they're looking to not necessarily cook at home. I'm curious, that loyalty that you've developed. How do you? What role does loyalty have in continuing the relationship with Chipotle and with consumers?
Well, I think it's everything, right? Because their whole world and their way of life has been disrupted. And I think that those are, from a marketer standpoint, you're looking for those moments when people are changing their behaviors. And I think that whether it's, when you graduate college or whether you get married or, those different types of things, those are openings for new brands to be relevant or old brands to maintain their relevancy. And so I think for us in that digital world, we typically had marketed to people who were new consumers to Chipotle. But during this time period, we really leaned into a lot of a lot of customers who were existing consumers of Chipotle, just not in the digital space. And so that we were trying to get people again to change their behavior, and we thought it would be great to get somebody who's already used to coming in, and maybe they don't come in at lunchtime anymore because they're not working. But how do we convert them to the digital space? And I think so. You're looking for opportunities, and maybe in the digital space we look for them not only just new consumers, but our own existing consumers, just trying to get them to pick up a new habit. And look, when times are tough, the good news is people's desire for real food didn't change. And I think you see all those lines because people are tired of eating this stuff at home, and they're looking forward to get back into some
really
semblance
true.
of normal and a brand that's a part of their normal routine.
It's really true. I have to tell you, I've been inspired to create the different restaurant breakfasts and lunches and dinners. I'm like, let's try to have a Spanish paella. Sai, I know you have had a specific experience working with Chipotle in regards to loyalty and driving engagement. Can you talk a little about that?
So we had an exciting project. It's literally over 2 weeks. We did this project with Chipotle, where Chipotle, as the COVID crisis came about, and Chipotle wanted to contribute to the frontline workers in this pandemic. So we partnered with them, where they gave away 100,000 essentially burritos, all went away in 2 hours. What we do to frontline workers, what we do is we essentially, in an online world, verify instantly if that person is a medical worker or not. So that enabled Chipotle to give to the cause they were focused on at that instant. The great thing about it was not only, it's a right thing to do, but also the kind of earned media generated was phenomenal. We were working with the Chipotle team. They were talking about like 167 media stories, 702 million social media impressions, and 100% positive net sentiment. So that's just one small project of a surprise and delight kind of thing you can do with your members.
Do you feel like, I know that you happened to mention when in our calls we've had weeks past, you identified those individuals as tribes. I just love that framing because it suggests a sort of unification of people all feeling similarly about a certain thing. Is that accurate, Sai? Is that how you?
Yeah, so the way to think about it, look, at the core of it, when you think loyalty is about richer engagement with your customers, and richer engagement in meaning understanding your buyer. And what we find is rather than just pure demographics, you should start thinking about consumer tribes, because when you think of a consumer tribe essentially as members of those tribes are strongly identified as belonging to that community. An example could be a set of students around a university, or it could be hospital workers around a particular hospital system, or it could be a military folks around a base, right? So there's a strong community there. There's a strong word of mouth. So when you have a compelling offer that appeals to that a person in that community, that goes viral, and that's the goal of it here. How do you deliver a compelling offer or an opportunity to a particular consumer that's relevant to you to create that virality?
That sounds, it's completely logical, and I think that having that tribe that cares enough about the brand, the brands that I go use are the ones that I want to associate myself with, and the ones that I want to feel closer to. And if the purpose that we've had or that's been aligned for me aligns what I believe and what I'm hearing that brand say, it makes me feel more likely to go and engage with that brand. I just want to quickly shout out a few folks around the world that are watching us on this panel. Let's see if I can do all the names right. Mercy from Tanzania, Amna from Bahrain, Linda from Brazil, Eric from New York, shout out New York, Mirhan from Istanbul, Raphael from Belgium, and I'm going to butcher this one, Magazozwena from Rwanda. So welcome everyone, and I will just say in about 8 minutes or so, we're gonna have some questions. We're gonna open up to both Chris and Sai. So please feel free to ask some questions. Chris, I want to pivot to you for a second. Knowing how I'll admit I'm a tremendous brand fan of Chipotle, so I will just admit that. So
that's great. My kids depend on that, so please keep up the good work.
Okay, I'm doing my best. I'm curious, knowing it's been a while. It's from the early days. I know that Chipotle has always had a purpose-led focus, but what would you offer as insight for other brands that are sort of trying to figure out what their purpose could be, or how do they connect a business need and the purpose need together? Because I feel like they shouldn't be in competition with one another, and often they should be connected. I feel like you'd be a perfect person to help guide brands and agencies that are looking to sort of solve this particular challenge.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you mentioned it before that consumers are looking more so now than ever for brands that they want to understand what the brand's values are, and for brands that align with their values and their principles. And we're lucky here at Chipotle that we've had Cultivate a Better World from the beginning, and so that helped us do things like, it was easy for us to do healthcare heroes and give back there, and racial equality things, and those incidences, because we could lean on the values that we had before. But not every brand is that lucky, and I think in those it's important. You can create a brand purpose, and it shouldn't be at odds with your business. And so I think you had to look at, how do consumers use your brand? What are they feeling? What do you want them to feel when they're using it? And then you can decide and what your purpose is. And that's an executive level conversation that you should have and get everybody's buy-in. But once you've agreed on those core brand values and what that purpose is, then it can help guide your decision making, whether it's buying organic ingredients or doing responsible things by the supply chain, and sourcing responsibly, whether it's beef or whether it's jalapeno peppers or whatever. Those are real core foundations that I think that, and it doesn't have to just be restaurants. But in short, if your brand doesn't have a purpose, that's okay. You can make one up. And that doesn't make it any less so as long as you live it, right? I think one of the earliest advices I got in marketing was be, then do, then say. And so, companies do good, and you can find those things that they do good and do well, and create a purpose around that of what you'd like to do more of. And I think that if you do that, then you'll be in good shape, and then it'll be easier to make those decisions in social and digital and brand actions that may have been hard or may have been disparate before.
Do you think obviously it's delicate right now for sure to sort of develop a brand purpose, like now we stand for this? But if you didn't have that beforehand, is now the moment to sort of figure it out, or should brands wait and arrive at when it feels organically natural?
I think that whole part of be, then do, then say, right? It's like, well, what do we think we want to do? What do we think what this brand is stand for? We don't have to tell everybody right now, but we have to start acting like that. Because you don't just want to say, well, now our brand purpose is X. Because you saw with a lot of the racial equality measures, that brands would come out and say things, and they were in social media. It can be a brutal place, and they get called on actions. They said, well, you say this now, but what happened last year when this happened or this happened? And I think that's where a brand can get into trouble, is doing things announcing that they are something that they contradicted with actions before. So I would just figure out what your purpose is, take some actions that are consistent with that purpose. And then when you announce what your purpose is at some point down the road, then you're like, okay, they have been walking the talk. And so it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Sai, do you have any thoughts about how the brands you've been working with and how they connect to purpose, and how, whether or not have all the brands that you've been working with had a purpose defined beforehand?
Not necessarily, right? So actually, the bigger challenge in most brands is they almost have two silos. There's a brand marketing team and there's a performance and acquisition marketing team. And many times they're not even connected together. What we have seen really good brands do is acquisition marketing is actually rooted in brand marketing. That makes sure, whatever you're saying out in the various channels is aligned with whatever your purpose and mission is. Now, going back to, Chipotle is in a great story where they actually had a mission right from the beginning, and they lived that mission, right? So, but at the same time, you can still do support the right social causes, even if that's not core to your mission, as long it is tied to your demographics or target audience, right? If something of really value to your target audience, you can do something to that with that audience related around a social cause. And let me give you an example, right? Lowe's, which in the home improvement business, they now historically they've also been doing a lot with the military, given the history. But they found out that one of the core audiences was do-it-yourselfers. They tend to be 30s, 40s, male, resourceful. What they realized was that aligns very well with the military audience. So they started doing many more things with the military community, along with when you sign up for the loyalty account. One of the questions they ask is, are you part of the military community, and instantly verify them. What that allows you to do is now, as a military member, you walk into a store or online, you automatically get 10% off. And now the consumer is actually explicitly given information about themselves, like their name, date of birth, and their military status, which then allows the brand to engage with the consumer on a regular basis, on an exclusive basis, just with that community. So you have an exchange of value where the consumer is saying, yes, I'm going to give you information about myself in return for some value.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to hear how that audience, it's totally it's 100% logical to make that connection across from a consumer to a brand and have those people feel like they're aligned with that brand in particular. I'm overwhelmingly aware of the kind of the environment that brands and marketers and agencies are all living in, pandemic plus the civil really revolution and evolution that's so very needed right now in our country. And I'm doing a lot of listening and learning and reading and watching and being as smart as I can be. But I believe that it's overwhelmingly important to endlessly talk about it and communicate that to other brand leaders and non-brand leaders, just to talk about, give the open door opportunity to communicate about it. But I think so many brands are afraid right now to say or do or act or do the wrong thing. What advice can you offer, Chris, to help avoid or deal with potential missteps that are literally where any brand is bound to make?
Yeah, look, maybe one of the easiest things to say and hardest things to do is really know yourself. And by knowing yourself, knowing your brand, I think self-awareness of your brand is really important. And to know, I think it is very difficult to navigate, when to jump in, how do you do it in an authentic way? And I think that's one of the beauties of Chipotle, is that we've really strived for transparency and authenticity for a while. So it made it a little bit easier for us there. But I think, you have to know your brand inside and out, and the legacies and the skeletons in your own closet. And that doesn't mean you can't take action if you have those. It just means you have to acknowledge that and kind of move on. I think, Chipotle had some very widely publicized food safety issues. We frankly were looking for a time to talk about all of the amazing measures that Chipotle's taken since then about food safety. We could never do it because it would dredge up those old memories. But COVID actually, a lot of the things that restaurants were implementing, we had already done. And it gave us a chance to talk about those things more. And we were recently named, one of the safest places, or the safest place that you can go from a restaurant standpoint. So I think, having a chance to talk about what makes you special and things that make you great. And, Sai said it too. The change, people didn't want to hear about food safety until, COVID came up. And people didn't, maybe appreciate the frontline healthcare workers as much until COVID came up. And so how do you pivot your brand and understand what consumers' perceptions are? What do they want to hear from the brand? I mean, for a while, and I think even now, consumers want to know your employees are healthy, your restaurants are safe. Yeah. And those weren't necessarily messages we had high on our radar screen back in February. Who knew the good old days would be February, right? But certainly those are things that we needed to publicize, both in restaurant materials and outside. And people wanted to know how you treat your employees. And the good news is we have a pretty good track record of benefits and employee benefits. And so we were able to share a lot of those things. So I think that things work out best for those who make the best of the way things work out. And so looking for those opportunities to give relevant communication to your consumer, the loyalty plan has been huge for us in being able to do that. I mean, we've grown the one silver lining of COVID, I guess, for us is that it's transported our digital business probably 3 years into the future. We have a lot more loyalty members. We have a better ability to engage them. We have a lot more awareness that you can get delivery through our own app and through third parties. And I hope that's a legacy that, will continue to stay. And I think will stay for us, even as restaurants open and hopefully things get back to normal, in the coming months.
Interesting. We just had a question come in from LinkedIn. I want to offer it to you. It's a little provocative, but I think it's interesting to hear your thoughts on it. It's from Karam on LinkedIn. How can consumers trust brands? Brands are under investor pressure, and we all know that investors care about dollars only. I think this is an interesting perspective. Investors, specifically, private equity, tends to think about the EBITDA, not necessarily the value for consumers on an ongoing basis. Although brands tend to think about obviously the connection with the consumer. So it's certainly interesting. Sai and Chris, you wanna see if you want to tackle this one? Sai, I'll try Sai first.
Well, look, in the long term, see, investor cares about long-term value of the brand, and the long-term value of the brand comes when you have customer lifetime is long, and that only comes through loyalty. So I don't think they are that disconnected in terms of if the investors cares about long-term value, the brand cares of the long-term value of the customer, and that comes through loyalty and doing the right thing with the customer. And they are aligned, if honestly, increasingly.
Chris, do you want to address that as well?
Yeah, look, we have a philosophy that we have to build sales for today and the brand for tomorrow, and those things are not mutually exclusive. Now, there certainly are short-term tactics that you can do to, dollar off promotions, those kind of things to drive some more business, but it's up to you to, take those consumers, those new consumers that come in and convert them into good ones with a good consumer experience. So I think you always have to have an eye on that. Look, I'm building sales today, but I'm also building the brand over time. And if you only build sales today, then you're constantly going to be chasing it. If you only build the brand for tomorrow, you're not going to hit the sales today. I think that's part of the art of being a CMO, is balancing those things out. But I don't think that if you're not building that brand for the long term, your sales in the short term are eventually going to decline as well. So you've got to have the eye on, your eye on the ball on both those accounts.
That's totally reasonable. I'd love to know, as we're sort of rounding this out, our time together, I have, I'm in my house, I'm there's some things that I have found that I'm enjoying the change, and some things that I wouldn't mind getting back to. I'm curious for both of you, both Sai and Chris, if you can tell me what's one pandemic related change that you're looking to keep, and what's one that you'd love to sort of let pass, go by the wayside. Actually, I'll begin with you, Sai, if that's okay.
It's more an internal thing, right? One of the things we realized is with employees, we were always, we're predominantly based in Oregon, but we have employees the world over. The remote video conference calls are actually working well for us. So even once our offices open up, we still want to have a little bit of a democratized way. So even if you're joining from the office, I would love my team members to still log into the conference call on the laptop, so everyone is on the level playing field. That's one thing I would love to keep it, including remote work. I encourage remote work. We haven't seen any drop off in terms of our productivity. So I want to give flexibility to employees as and when needed, right, to work remotely. I would love to see them again in person. So, looking forward to being back in the office and actually seeing people,
Yeah, I feel you on that one. Chris, what's one thing you want to keep? What's one thing you want to let go?
Yeah, look, I think Sai's exactly right. I think that the ice has been broken about conference calls and working from home. I think travel is going to be certainly, you don't need to do as much of it, as maybe you had to in the past. And I used to spend a lot more time on the road, so I'm kind of looking forward to being at home. But I do think I will be glad to get back into the office. I think that the biggest worry, people ask me, hey, what's your biggest worry? I think the culture we've created with our group of folks at Chipotle is pretty special. And I think it's hard to maintain that, when you're constantly just over the computer screen and not together. And so I do look forward to, getting back into the office and helping, build that culture. And there's no substitute for doing that. Will we be more flexible going forward? Probably. But I think that, getting back in the office on a regular basis, I think will be nice.
I agree with you. Chris and Sai, I want to thank you both for joining me on today's Publishers Panel. You both did an amazing job, and your insights were really valuable. I want to thank you both for joining me.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate the opportunity.
You're certainly welcome. Guys, I enjoyed this tremendously, and I look forward to seeing your company's future success as you grow. Thank you all for tuning in, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.